It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name's Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing the...
And today we are discussing the 4 stories from Zen Cho's Spirits Abroad collection that contain lesbians, except for the Terracotta Bride, which we have already covered.
Yes, the sentence that I was trying to say was the lesbian portion of Spirits Abroad. But
yes,
it didn't
exactly.
come out of my mouth.
The other stories are quite good, but they don't contain lesbians, so you'll just have to read them yourself.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Most of them are quite good. It's a collection. It's uneven.
So how are we going to handle this? There's like 4 stories here. I don't know if we want to go through all of their plots individually or just sort of embark on a Zen Cho.
On the Zen Cho show?
Yeah,
I honestly think we should just go. I think we should go to the spoiler zone right away, unless.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All
obviously, there
4
are
stories.
lesbians.
Yes, obviously there are lesbians. There are debatable amounts of wizards in the various stories.
There's one very definite Wizards versus Lesbians wizard in here.
Yes, and there's several that are not. But yeah, and I guess why should you read? We can talk about the stories as a whole. Why you should read them?
Yeah, I mean they're similar enough. I think that you can do that.
Yeah, another thing about this is that this is definitely these are all the fairly wholesome, positive stories. Not all of them, but many of them from the collection. So
yeah, all of these are more uplifting than the Terracotta Bride was, certainly.
Yes.
I would say that as sort of a blanket, the reason that you should read these is that Zen Cho's prose is extremely mellifluous. I think that just reading her sentences is pleasurable by itself.
Yes, I enjoy her dialogue too. It has this very energetic, lively, feels very natural back and forth.
Yeah, no, the way that she does patois is very charming and presumably true to life, although I wouldn't know, which is a theme that we may keep going back to.
I would, because I've had a bunch of Malaysian and Singaporean classmates, and yes, I mean they tone it way down when they're hanging out with the English speaking crowd, but I could definitely hear the cadences in my head. I'll say that. Indeed,
it brings a sort of a musicality to the whole affair, which I appreciate. You're going to get a real. Another reason to read it is that you're going to get exposed to a lot of interesting bits and pieces of mythologies and belief systems from various cultures that you may or may not have encountered before, and get to see a lot of exotic locations where a lot of South Asian people are going to be, Singapore, Malaysia, Cambridge. It's a fun time, and there's also an undercurrent of righteous anger flowing pretty much everything that she writes that I've read.
Yes,
which I find invigorating.
Yes, no, absolutely, and these stories manage to have that undercurrent of anger while also being all of them are sort of deeply affirming and positive.
Yeah, no, these 4 stories were just a good time.
Yeah.
We should probably also name these stories.
Yes. So I will name them because I have the book right in front of me.
Right.
So I guess we'll just cover them in order that they appear in the book, which I think works pretty well. Mm-hmm. So the first is The Guest. The second is The Mystery of the Suet Swain. The third is The Perseverance of Angela's Past Life. And the fourth is, if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Indeed. Is that perseverance or perseverance, incidentally?
I've always pronounced it perseverance. I don't know.
Oh, really? I think they're 2 separate words. Anyway,
this is one of those things that happens when you learn all your vocabulary from books.
Yeah, I'm going to edit this out anyway. I was just momentarily taken aback by that.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It may well be perseverance.
Regardless, I like perseverance better, but then it makes me think of perseverating, which is a different thing than persevering.
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair.
But anyway,
But sometimes the emphasis on syllables does change when you change what kind of word it is. So
absolutely. I'm sure that if we looked it up, it would be like both of these are accepted. Regardless. So as far as like why you shouldn't read these stories, I can't think of many reasons.
I don't know. You don't like fun.
If you object to encountering a lot of words that you don't know, but refuse to pick them up from context.
You're right. It is perseverance.
Oh,
All right,
sorry.
the perseverance of Angela's past life.
All right.
You can just edit that in.
No, this is all staying in now.
Oh, God. All right.
Anyway, but yeah, beyond that, I can't. I mean, it's not much of your time. This is a really charming selection of tales.
Yes, and the collection, while uneven, is by and large, I think, worth reading.
Indeed.
If you do get the Small Beer Press collection, which among other things has "If at First You Don't Succeed" in it.
Yeah, the other thing about this is that the Spirits Abroad is available in 2 different editions that have multiple different selections of stories in them, and like the EPUB edition has stuff in it that the text, like that the printed edition doesn't, and there's also an audiobook, and I don't know what's in that. And
Just get the collection published by Small Beer Press.
Indeed.
All right.
So, having established all that, I don't think... Is there anything... Oh, content warnings, sexual menace.
Yeah, there's stalking.
Stalking.
There's stalking, and there's a little bit of stuff about food and eating, which I think if you have an eating disorder, you may want to handle with care. That's in the Perseverance of Angela's Past Life.
Indeed.
Oh, and also, as we will discuss it more in detail, if you are if you have escaped postgraduate education and did not end up in academia, or perhaps did and are unhappy, then If at First You Don't Succeed may make you feel some emotions.
Yes, although that story is trying to make you feel emotions and will make you feel a variety of emotions probably, but yes, no, that is definitely...
Yes, but I read that story like 2 months after, finishing my PhD and deciding I wasn't going to go after a tenure track job.
Mm.
And it made me cry on the max.
Yes. Shall we head to the spoiler zone then? I think that...
Spoiler zone!
What do they mean by max? Well, M stands for metropolitan, A stands for area, X kind of stands for express. No, it's not our streetcar, and it's not the gondola that just goes up one hill, and it's not the bus service that pretends to be a train but isn't, like you get in cities these days when you can no longer spend money on infrastructure. It's the Max train. It's light rail. It's one of our 4 different public transportation options that add up to less than the sum of their parts. Spoiler zone, by the way. Spoiler zone. I have to confess that like one of my major reactions to reading these stories was just feeling an upswelling of affection for you specifically, because among the bit that we just mentioned about grad school and its effects aside, like reading The Guest, I was just like, oh man, Alexis would love to be this person in this story.
Well, I mean, as it happens, I managed to find my wife through equally unlikely circumstances.
Yes.
But yes, no, this is absolutely... So let's start talking about The Guest, which is absolutely, I think, a lesbian fantasy.
The specificity of the lesbian fantasy of the girlfriend who moves into your house before she even becomes a human being that you can talk to and is also your cat. Like, what else do you need?
Right. So the main character, whose name I'm going to have to look up, Eling. So Eling is a lesbian who has whose works. Her day job is to work for a some sort of company. I don't remember. It doesn't really matter. She does like marketing copy and stuff like that. And her part-time job is to side hustle is that she does smell-based magic.
Yes.
She is a witch, and all of her magic, as she says, she works primarily with smells, and she adds the primarily there because she feels like it makes her sound more professional.
Right, as opposed to exclusively, I need to sniff things.
Yes.
In order to do what I do.
And one day she smells a cat, and she can tell, and she knows exactly what the deal is, but you, the reader, do not. And she takes the cat home, even though she is not a cat person, and she takes care of this cat as she does a variety of smell-based magic. Trying to help a woman with her philandering, with her guy
boyfriend.
Well, philandering, but he's not even her boyfriend. He's somebody else's boyfriend, and he's cheating on his girlfriend with her.
Right.
And at which, and once this case has been successfully wrapped up, the cat transforms herself into a beautiful Malay lesbian woman who, has basically just been scoping her out as a potential partner and has now decided that this woman is, dating material, partnership material. And so now she's going to cheerfully run her life.
Yes.
Immediately, she's just like, oh yeah, no. Okay, we'll just, clearly we need to move into a better place. I don't like your landlady. So we'll just, you just need an office and a bedroom. And Ealing is like, only one bedroom? And she was like, yes, obviously. What did you think was going on with me? Why did you think I decided to turn into a cat?
Yeah, no, it is so the more of it you describe, the more specifically it locks into just like, not only is the cat turning into my girlfriend, but she's gonna fix my life for me now.
She's gonna fix my life for me.
And also she's going to make the first move so I don't have to, and
yes.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, exactly. And, I suppose that if you didn't know that sayang is Malaysian for darling or sweetie, the story might be a little bit weirder, but I think the point still comes across pretty clearly.
Yes. This is what I was talking about. Context is your friend.
Anyway, so this one's just like mostly warm and fuzzy, except for, and happy and like this magical lesbian fantasy, except for the fact that, one of these girls just sort of left her home because her family was never going to accept her, and the other one was homeless and had to turn into a cat. Yeah.
No, I mean, presumably because she was, as you said, like, why do you think I turned into a cat? Presumably because, life as a gay woman wasn't going too great as a human being. So this seemed like the better alternative,
No, she, like she says it. She says it exactly. She says, somebody told my boss at work and I got fired and I panicked and ran away. Ended up no money, no house, must sleep on the street.
Yep. There you go. A cat.
That's also why she ran away from her parents' house.
Yeah, so again, we're not shying away from any of the realities of the situation, but we're going to plant our foot firmly in that and then just, dream the nicest dream that we can.
Pretty much. Yeah, there's another sort of bit of hints at sort of some of the problems is that, Ealing noted that she was Malay, but that would not be a problem. It was not like they could get married anyway.
Yeah, which really leads, down a whole, the homophobia rabbit hole on the one side, and then the, colorism /
interracial,
presumably largely, well, I don't want to speculate about which side that would be mostly from, but regardless, yeah, in that sort of circumstance, it's just like, this feels like a nice dream,
right.
The whole thing is so brief and poetic, that, it almost just spirals out of a daydream, and it has that, and like, it's not a coincidence, I think, that she is a smell witch specifically, because that's just so, it's a very weird thing to be that nobody's heard of, which, tracks with everything else, and that she has to sort of modulate herself in order to be acceptable even in the sort of demi-monde of, witch doctory that she has found herself in. But that that the whole thing sort of springs from that kind of pre-verbal, sensation, dream logic.
Yeah.
From the sort of I smelled the cat on the road in the storm.
And could tell that, that this too was a lesbian.
Well, I mean, we've have we actually discussed at any point the sort of the Yuri is a battlefield and Yuri is a natural disaster, all that sort of
the Yuri of absence. I don't.
Yeah, no, but we a lesbian can be many things, many of them very abstract.
But in this case, the cat is also
it's
literally a lesbian.
The cat is just a lesbian. What I was trying and failing to reference there was an interview with the Yuri author Yuri Miyazawa, an excerpt which I'll read for you now. Yuri says, there's this movie called Sicario by Denis Villeneuve, released in 2015. It's a thrilling masterpiece about the drug war in Mexico. The composer of the movie soundtrack, Johan Johansson, passed away this year, and according to one of his interviews, there were two themes in the soundtrack. The sense of dread of two wild beasts glaring and pouncing at each other represents the battle to the death between the illegal police force and the mafia. And this other theme was the melancholy of the border area, two emotional themes. If you listen to the soundtrack with that in mind, you cannot perceive it as anything but Yuri, though the movie itself is not Yuri at all. To which the interviewer says, so if neither the story nor the characters have any Yuri, what exactly are you supposed to imagine? Two wild beasts glaring and pouncing at each other. It's Yuri, isn't it? I see. I mean, the downside is that I have, and this is going to be a recurring thing, unfortunately, is that I don't have much more to say about it than that.
This one I felt very, even though there's some stuff to dig into, because it is a good story about loneliness and isolation. There's this thing where even before the cat ever turns into a girl and is acting entirely like a cat, it's just, it actually turns out that it's really lonely being kind of cut off from your family. And she's, especially when you're being, you're not even out to them. It's just they think you're kind of weird and don't like what you're doing with your life.
Yeah. And, I don't think that we have to really sell cats to our core audience, probably. No. But the utility of the cat, it was not something that I fully understood until I met your late Aurora.
Aurora, may her memory be a blessing.
Indeed. But like just there are, sure, this is a semi-domesticated companion animal that, we have brought in to attack rodents, and in the case of your new cat, Master Pancake, bats. But
yes,
sorry, that's Anshul's new nickname because he is a bat hunter, and
he has caught two bats for us. And do not worry, he did not harm the bats. As soon as he caught them, he was just as startled as they were, and he let them go. But it's a remarkably effective early warning system for when you have a bat.
As to how I got from bat hunting to Master Pancake, some things are better off not explained. That's true. That is true. But regardless, the cat, or many of our, not all cats, certainly some cats are the frigid stereotype that cat haters will parade out. But there are many cats who have evolved a secondary usefulness to human beings, which is close attention to our emotional states and appropriate responses to those things.
Yes, which in Aurora's case meant that I would start to cry and she would bite me.
That's also my reaction when people I care about cry, but it's less welcome usually.
I mean, the first time it happened with Aurora, it also wasn't very welcome, but it did get me to stop crying.
But yes, no, she divided her time between, helping to regulate your emotional state and stealing all of the food.
Yes.
And, these are, This is valuable. I mean, this is obviously a pro cat podcast, but I'd like to state that there are solid foundational, not toxoplasmatic reasons for this.
Yes. And and I think part of that is that it is good to have a little guy in your house. And when you are feeling isolated and lonely, which
100%, and way better idea to get a cat than have a kid.
Yes. And even if the cat does not ever turn into a beautiful lesbian who will fix your life,
the cat might attract a beautiful lesbian who will fix your life.
There you go. Yeah. I think we're done with the story.
Yes, I think so. I felt like we needed to say a few more things. So
yes, no, absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to the mystery of the Suet Swain, which is definitely our most traditionally Wizles, in that it has a lesbian and it has a monster in something very close to a man's body, who has manipulative mind powers, and boy do they fight.
Indeed, and he is a stalker and an information collector and a manipulator.
Yes, so this is a basically sort of a loosely inspired by Sherlock Holmes story, except Sherlock is a Malaysian lesbian college student, and Watson is her beautiful and very, very normie roommate and best friend.
It is the thing that I've most strongly felt, reading this is like, oh, this is how you do this. In reference to what is apparently becoming a series of books because it was successful, of which I will say little, because I can't even remember the name of the story now.
Oh,
it's
yes,
not
yes,
even though
yes.
I knew the end, it's the other
one.
No,
yeah. I just read the sequel, The Imposition of Unnecessary Obstacles, which I have to say was actually worse.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, The Mimicking of Known Successes.
And Mimicking of Known Successes, yes.
But yes, those are in the opinion of this podcast, those are bad. And in the series of like 10 pages, this does the Holmes and Watson, but they're Asian lesbians thing considerably better.
I would absolutely read a novella-length story about Sham and Belinda, so...
Yeah, no, they're great. Sham likes musicals. Belinda likes Beckett. She wears Snurp Snot. No!
Right! Yes. Okay, so this story is... So Sham is our autistic lesbian, and Belinda is her beautiful best friend and roommate who is mostly pretty normie, except for liking, somewhat highbrow theater. And Belinda...
we're also, we're within the normie, we are at Cambridge.
Right,
and
that's
we are at, we are at the kind of, we send our richest, but also our most overachieving and smartest people to Cambridge, community.
Yes.
And she's no dummy.
No, despite the fact that she's majoring in something that she's no good at.
Yes. But,
there's the really cute moment where, Sham feels like she has to step in and protect Belinda, who is a law major, from being asked questions about law, which stress her out, because she's not very good at it.
I mean, we've all been there. It's not like Belinda got to choose what she was going to study at Cambridge. Let's be real. This was obviously laid out for her.
Belinda, unfortunately, is the sort of girl who hates to hurt people's feelings, which is why it is useful for her to have a very extremely blunt autistic best friend. But it means that when 11 separate boys keep giving her increasingly expensive gifts, she just sort of keeps them and never uses them and feels very bad about it.
Yes.
And so this means that when she attracts a supernatural stalker, this is a much bigger problem, because she actually does try to get rid of his gifts, and they keep appearing. And then he starts tagging her in Facebook photos of herself in, sleeping or putting her makeup on in the morning or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And he is, in fact, a traditional, the most loserish of the traditional Malaysian ghosts, Hantu, who is just an entity that is literally made of grease, which is just a great...
like a palm oil, He's
A
made
palm
entirely
oil
of palm
golem.
oil.
Yeah.
Right. And not a golem. Golems
Yeah.
are,
What's the word? An elemental. It's not.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, he's a
He was
palm
not
oil
construction on
elemental.
purpose. Yeah.
And so, and it's great because it manages to be, this story works fairly well. The supernatural element is well incorporated, but there's a long period of time where this would not even have to be a supernatural story, except for maybe the difficulty of getting some of the, but not all of the photos, because this is really a story about how people will enable bad behavior, especially stalking behavior, on the part of entitled men who feel like, and, will use some women's difficulty saying no as an excuse to violate everybody's boundaries.
Yes. No. The book. I mean, this is kind of a homily. And many of
Yes.
if Zen Cho has a weakness as a writer of short stories, is that some of her short stories are. I mean, it's not even necessarily weakness. Sometimes a little morality play is fine, but like subtlety is not what we're going for in this specific short story. And because like our hero basically, or our Sherlock, remind me of her name, sorry.
Sham, I believe.
Yeah, Sham. Sham basically turns to the camera and says what you just said.
Yes.
The problem is that people find this behavior charming and enable it by, normalizing it,
Yes. And really, and honestly, you could have cut that paragraph and the message still would have been very clear, because there's
Right.
the whole thing where, he's sort of, there's the whole thing where they invite Belinda over, where some mutual friends invite Belinda over. And it is clear that they have done this at our oil ghost's, who has named himself Bullet Sri Kaya, at Bullet's request.
Oil Ghost. Yeah.
And like that is totally the sort of thing you can imagine people doing, right? Is you've got the guy who's got the crush on the girl, and he's like, hey, will you invite her? Let's all have dinner. Will you invite her over? You don't even have to tell, you don't even have to tell her that I'm the one doing the cooking yet.
Yeah. People think it's cute.
Right.
Absent any additional context, particularly if they have magical oil in their ears.
Right. But like the thing is that you can imagine people doing that not absent context. And you get all this thing where all the guys who talk about him are like, oh yeah, no, I mean, he's a bro. He's really kind of girl crazy, but but he's also the side thing about how he's chasing 11 girls and is an unofficial big brother to like another 5, all of whom are skinny Chinese chicks, was a nice little
it is a nice touch. I also like how that man is greasy works in all languages and cultures.
Right. Yes.
With the possible exception of Turkey because of the oil wrestling. But anyway.
Right. But, so basically, this wouldn't even have to necessarily be a supernatural story, but it also makes total sense when you finally show up and he is stark naked and made out of palm oil.
Yes, exactly. And in the end, yes, we get the moment where Belinda self-actualizes and tells him to fuck off, which isn't enough, but thankfully,
right.
But Shan is there to denature him.
Yeah, she has brought an entire bottle of like oven cleaner or whatever
Right.
that she just dumps on him. Which, yes, and I mean, I actually kind of like that. I mean, that Belinda needs to tell him to fuck off for Belinda's emotional health, because she needs to, she needs to have that kind of closure and catharsis. But that will not actually stop the monster. What will stop the monster is her, her autistic best friend.
Do you have a mean autistic best friend? You should get a mean autistic best friend. They can be very useful for your projects.
Who has a bottle of oven cleaner.
Yes, no, pouring solvent on creeps is a good way to get rid of them. I love the way that the people who have been gold into setting this up, like, when Shan walks in, it's like she's the specter at the feast, like the lesbian autistic friend who stepped into this, meet cute, we're setting them up situation, and he is so shocked that he, burns her carpet.
Right. And
Yeah,
Sham
no.
and Sham really enjoys rubbing that in too, speculating about how much his damage deposit's going to be and stuff like that. I did also like the touch when they're like, "Why are you stalking Belinda?" And he's like, "Oh, I found her on Facebook. She was the 16th most beautiful woman I'd seen."
Yes. And what happened to the other 15?
Me. But
Me. Yes, exactly.
right, but just that it's like, oh yeah, she's not even the most beautiful. He's working his way down. Which, I mean, to be serious for a moment, something that I learned when I was on the disciplinary subcommittee for grad students is that it's somewhere between like 5 and 8 times is the amount of times that somebody will commit sexual assault before they get caught. So, 16 is, I think, within the bell curve
Completely
there.
within. Yeah, yeah.
Especially when you consider that he has supernatural grease powers.
And lest we forget that Facebook was created as an app for rating
Stalking!
the attractiveness of your female college students. So, that's cool. I just think that people don't bring that up enough. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, also, one last thing that I enjoyed about this story is the moment when they find, when, Bullet has stolen Belinda's club shirt, and she gets it back, and it has this giant stain, and they're both like, this is so gross. And then Sham is like, oh, no, wait, this is just palm oil. And being, the detective genius that she is, goes, huh, this probably isn't true, but just in case, I'm going to bring the solvent.
Indeed. Well, I mean, she first confirms it by finding the computer in the corner of the lab that's covered in grease.
Right.
So, I guess I just wanted to go back to the sort of like, he's a bro thing. Like, I just think about all of these celebrity stories that we come across. And, I was thinking specifically of like, the way I've been watching a bunch of hip hop history videos recently, and the way that various communities thought about Kanye West, up into a point where it's like, oh, he's okay. He's saying these things, but he obviously doesn't believe them. It's obviously a bit. He's pretending to be a creep weirdo, and like a bigot. And then as he kept saying them over the years and kept saying them more loudly and emphatically, they're like, wait a minute. And it's like the exact tipping point for that turned out, to be like a good ways down the line, and, in different places for different people. But the moral of the story is believe what people tell you about themselves. Like not uncritically, but like, it's not always great to make excuses for people for like, cultural or social reasons.
Yeah.
Particularly when they're just doing this kind of thing right out in the open.
Yeah.
So I think what I meant by this is if people tell you bad things about themselves in a kind of jokey way, or in an attempt to make you feel more intimate with them, believe those negative things. They're probably true, and that might not be disqualifying. As I said, it might be useful to have a mean, autistic friend.
So I do have one last thing to say about this story, which is that you didn't read this one, but it is the story that immediately follows it. Prudence and the Dragon is also a story about a girl whose suitor will not go away. But in that case, it's a rom-com, the suitor being the dragon, and, they eventually get together. And in the old edition of Spirits Abroad, which has some author notes in it, the one thing that this edition lacks, the Small Beer Press edition lacks, she's like, yeah, I put them next to each other so you can see the contrast. But basically, sometimes, the same narrative can be a horror story or a romantic fantasy, just depending on whether or not the girl's into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wonder if that's is the girl who's dating the dragon the friend then?
Yes.
To segue of...
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So, and Angela is a side character in that as well. So yes.
So this is the perseverance of Angela, of Angela's past life. There we go.
Yes. This is a little bit like this deal. It handles it in a very different way, but it has very similar. The basic subject matter is very similar to Nuka, which we covered in
Yes,
a previous short fiction podcast episode.
indeed. The her past self isn't,
A mouth on the back of her head.
but it is. She is turning into a pig and following her around. In addition to just sort of stalking her as a general matter.
Yes, and basically, what if your awkward teenage self, who you have finally managed to cast off, starts following you around?
I mean, I don't know whether this is something that we can all relate to, but it's certainly something I can relate to. I found this, I think that I definitely had this period of my life where I had put aside childish things and was pretending to be a relatively, normal human being, if you all can believe it.
Right, no, this is absolutely a story about being like in your mid-20s and you've finally cast off all the embarrassing cringe stuff. And then, this is in the moment before you realize, most often it takes actually till your 30s, that no, actually the adolescent cringe stuff was great.
Yes, exactly. It's a journey that I followed. And, say what you will about Homestuck, but that was really the crack in the dam for me. Sorry to reset the counter there, but I feel like it should be given credit for that. Like,
yeah, no, that's fair.
It helped me embrace my cringe. That's what got me to write fan fiction, which I would have never even considered doing for social terror reasons before that point.
Right, no, exactly. I mean, I think you and I think both have that experience of, oh, finally we don't have to be our cringy selves. In my case, it was, more my middle school self.
Right.
Because I went to a better high school. But, and, honestly, it would have been kind of nice if my cringy preteen self had been following me around, reminding me of all the ways that, actually, all the things that I'm pretending aren't true about myself anymore.
Yeah, no, there were definitely many parties where I would have appreciated it if my high school self had come up to me and be like, "You like being here? Why are you here?"
Right.
Although unfortunately he would also have been like, "Oh, cool, like an indie rock house show, nice," because he was, the various that. I mean, this is sort of the difference here is that, like, I was always status conscious and wanted to be, accepted and respected by people, even as if I was, a snob and thought, and was comforting myself with thoughts of being smart. Whereas Pikmin here is just like, why are you doing all of this? We never liked any of this. And apparently didn't, aspire to any of this either. So...
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like Angela's going to give up being a medical student or, I guess now, doctor, or any of that, but she's, and probably she's still going to fly out, take planes places. But maybe she can now accept to herself, admit to herself that she doesn't like it.
Yeah, and also the point that we haven't mentioned is that one of the things that Pikmin needs to remind her is that she's a lesbian.
Well, she's bi. But
she's bi, yes.
She's bi.
Which,
but yes, this is also a story of.
Although actually, that's also relatable because, like, I was like, I went from bi to straight to bi.
Right, exactly.
over time.
Right, I mean, this is also a story of having your first crush be so embarrassing that, or your first, relationship be so embarrassing that you promptly bury yourself.
Right, you literally cut yourself in half as a result.
Right.
My history with boys is so bad. How bad is it? My history with boys is so bad that it makes my history with girls seem downright reasonable by comparison.
And, again, I think that's, well, and also that you, like, shove yourself back in the closet, very specifically. Yes. And that shoving, because, I mean, part of this is that she felt like she had to distance herself from the part of her that's queer, and that means inevitably distancing yourself from a lot of yourself.
Yes. Which is one of the reasons why being closeted hurts, even, in addition to everything that we've, already that the culture already understands at this point. Part of it is just like, any kind of core alienation where you can't be yourself in public, is exhausting for one thing.
Right.
And just like does gradual damage to you over time, until you're able to get yourself out of it, which dovetails nicely with the sort of masking conversations that we've had on this pod.
Yeah.
Because this is coming out of the closet is a kind of unmasking, of course.
Yeah.
And being your cringe kind of like, being your neurodivergent self has a similar sort of personal valence. You know, and like one can litigate the extent to which, you should modulate yourself somewhat just not to be a complete menace to everybody around you. But, for the most part, we all tend to err too much on the side of hiding, I think.
Yeah. So I did want to also talk about the food thing and the weight thing, because I thought that was interesting.
Well, Pigmon being Pigmon and being a literal pig is not coincidental, but yes.
Yes.
There's definitely some eating disorder stuff in here.
Right. Well, and specifically, she only ever eats to 70% full, and she's like picking at her fish, even though it's delicious, because, if she eats slowly enough, then maybe she can feel full before she eats any more. And having her adolescent self chew her out because, 70% isn't a good grade.
Yeah. That's good. Use one kind of social conditioning to fight a different kind of
right, exactly. And,
sometimes that works.
Right. And the and that, when she makes peace, the sort of the most overtly, in some ways, supernatural part of all of this, as opposed to this just being in her own head, is that when she makes peace with her younger self and, incorporates her younger self into her, she immediately puts on a bunch of weight.
And like, also that's just a product of getting older.
Right, exactly. Like in some ways, Angela sort of got to speed run her 20s and her like mid to late 20s and early 30s. While still having all the youth. So this is in some ways another real wish fulfillment fantasy story.
Yeah. This is yet another tangent because I'm continuing to pad this out, but I'm aware of all of the many, 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 many ways in which the Olympics are problematic. But I also really enjoy watching the Olympics.
Yeah.
And
that's how I feel about the Olympics, and also how I feel about fireworks, to be honest.
Celebrations in general.
I know they're problematic, but they go boom and they sparkle.
Yes, indeed. But it is always just lovely to, as I was doing earlier today, watch the women's heavyweight weightlifting finals and watching these enormous, like incredibly strong women, lifting enormous amounts of weight and being celebrated for just how enormous they were. Mm-hmm. It's like specifically they couldn't do this and they couldn't be celebrated for this if they weren't huge.
Right.
And the winner was the hugest of them all. And that just felt nice. And this is like repeated. Like there's been a couple of them, like the women's javelin champion, Japanese woman, like, a fat athletic woman who can throw things hella far, it's just nice to see it.
Yeah, no.
And people not even being complete assholes about it in the comments either.
Wow,
so,
that's the real miracle.
Yeah, no, genuinely. So yeah, no, I did appreciate that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and then also, apparently on her, the extra weight looks good because she immediately, makes eye contact with another girl in her language teaching camp, and immediately the girl starts blushing and smiling a bunch, and probably twirling her hair.
This is true more often than people think it is,
right?
Just across the board, and I'm of course of course, tastes differ, and but one, you're going to look healthier if you're the weight that your body wants to be, and that's going to be more attractive in a number of ways. And B, also if you're going one of the benefits of going the gay side, if you're bi, is that if you're already throwing off what the culture thinks is acceptable and already sort of disallowing yourself from being a trophy, then people aren't going to get their cultural signifiers maybe quite as mixed up in their attractiveness. He said, completely ignoring an enormous amount of gay male culture. As he says it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Like, I get what you were trying to go for, but I don't really think you pulled it off.
I lost myself over the course of the sentence. I was like, "Oh, Isaac, you're talking nonsense again." The first part was true, though.
Yeah, the first part was true, and I mean, there's also just the point that force of personality and charisma go a long way, and being somewhat
comforted with yourself
and being somewhat comfortable in your own skin and being willing to own all these parts of yourself that are cringe will make you, conversely, more, in general, some people will cringe away, but by and large, just owning that stuff will, not only make you happier, but often can actually make socializing a little bit easier.
True enough. Really not giving a fuck is very useful for all kinds of things in your life.
Yes.
Reduces stress, makes you just generally happier.
If only we could get in touch with, if only we could just reconnect with the ghosts of our younger selves and magically gain the ability to give less of a fuck.
Yes, 8-year-old me who was convinced that he was the smartest person in the world and, worthy of all accolades. I actually maybe need less of him now that I say that out loud. But anyway.
I don't know. I could probably use a little bit more of 11-year-old Alexis, but
I would lend you some of this if I could.
All right. So it's interesting. In some ways, these are 3 different kinds of wish fulfillment stories. There's the sort of the lesbian one, and then there's the straight girl one where you have your lesbian best friend who will scare off all the boys you don't like, and then there's the bisexual one where your cringy closeted self comes back and gives you magical self-actualization powers and makes you magnetic to people of your same sex.
Yeah, I didn't mention this when we were talking about it, but I thought about it and forgot it. But I really actually did appreciate that Sham is just straight up ugly.
Yes.
And that's fine. That's part of her character. Great. That's more, speaking of body positivity, that's just more stuff that we need.
Yeah. And it super doesn't bother her because that's just not a thing she cares about. And
not a thing she cares about at all.
And it honestly is
lucky.
Right. And honestly, when she decides she wants a girlfriend, I'm sure she'll be able to get one.
Exactly. 3 down, 1 to go. But these 3 stories are very much of a piece. They're quite similar in some ways, but the last story is very different and for a number of reasons. And it is probably my favorite of the 4.
It is one of my favorite pieces of short fiction, because I am, kind of incapable. I read this at a moment in my life when I was particularly vulnerable to it and am kind of incapable of being completely unbiased and objective.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, I will step in as the person who is unbiased, except to the extent that I've been obsessed with a Taoist video game lately, which is Nine Souls, which I recommend to anybody who doesn't. Actually, I can't, unfortunately, recommend it to everybody because it's extremely difficult. But if you want to look into the fan art tag or read the story of it, or whatever.
If only you lived in Ithaca and I could just watch you play it.
I'm gonna do a little let's play of it.
Oh, maybe I'll watch that. But the let's plays aren't as fun as just hanging out and watching your friends play computer games.
This is true. I was actually thinking about that. I was like, man, I want to play this in Chinese with Alexis around, so that you can give me insights into the translation choices. But anyway, that aside,
Don't know if my Chinese is good enough for that anymore, but
I mean, practice for you then.
that's
You know.
fair. All right, so
But anyway,
yeah.
the this we're moving. There's some cultural changing here. We're moving to Korea, and we're moving from sort of Malaysian animism to Taoism.
I don't actually know if we're in Korea. We might actually be in the U.S.
I think we are in Korea initially, and then we're in the U.S. later.
Yeah, I think so because I'm pretty sure that Leslie is a Korean American.
Yeah. But the worm, I forget what they're actually called.
Imugi.
Imugi. Yeah, the imugi is a large serpent who is there. The job of an imugi is to study the Tao and to study all of the learned sages of the way, and that's a hell of a job because I actually saw an image on some site a while ago, which is comparing the size of like the Christian Bible to the size of the Taoist scriptures, just as paper, and one just dwarfing the other.
Well, I mean, the thing is that Taoism doesn't have like a canonical set of scriptures in quite the same way, but
Exactly. But
so you can tweak the definitions. Or you can start piling on like Augustine and Aquinas. So
right, and if you could get the Talmud in there and then just like
right.
pile on, but regardless, there's a lot of studying to be done if you want to try to understand the way, particularly because none of it is meant to make any rational sense. So,
and so Byam, our friend Byam, is a serpent who really wants to be a dragon and has, it spends the first 1,000 years of its existence, devotedly studying the Tao.
Yes.
And is about ready to ascend to becoming a dragon and is promptly brought crashing back to Earth by humans who see it, know that it is a serpent, and thus prevent it from transcending.
Yes. Telling the thing what it is by observing it is enough to prevent it from becoming something else, which is, I think that's a pretty deep and broad idea.
Yes.
Observation creates reality, eh? Doesn't this remind you about quantum physics? Conceptual overlap between Taoism and quantum physics? He said, instantly transforming into the most annoying man in the world, writing 3 or 4 pop science books, cornering you at a party, maybe commissioning himself a soul portrait. And it is, in fact, Byam's own fault because
Byam ate an entire herd of cows.
Byam ate because he was just really hungry. He'd forgotten
Byam
to eat
is definitely
it. Sorry.
Byam is it, and when Byam takes human form, it's a woman. So he is the least applicable pronoun here for Byam. Byam isn't it, it's lesbian, really.
I was just thinking about a person binge eating and then failing, and I immediately, felt for him or felt for it, and thus projected my own gender identity onto it. But
right, but no, Byam would do great on Tumblr as an it's lesbian.
Yes, exactly. which my buddy Helimity would have an issue with. But what to say about my friend Helimity? She says things that people get upset about for some reason. But nobody ever said that the things a troll says have to be wrong.
So then Byam spends another 1,000 years and tries again.
Yes, and of course fails again. This time, is this failure 2 or 3?
This is failure 2 is with the clouds.
Yes, and it is attempting to distract everybody with a huge, cool cloud sculpture so that they won't
of a dragon
look at it.
Byam wants everybody to look at it like in the cloud sculpture and see a dragon and point at Byam in the clouds and say, "Oh, look, it's a dragon," and then Byam will become a dragon.
Yes, but instead. What is it? An errant wind or something along those lines? I'm sorry, I've forgotten the details.
Well, first there's a pirate battle going on, and so nobody's paying attention. And then the clouds, I think, get blown away or whatever. And so
indeed. And so Byam is just like sorely tempted to give up at this point, but is like, no, I'm gonna give it one more shot. We're gonna get in here for another millennium.
And here's
And
where we get some really funny things about like all the self-actualization mantras that dragons say to each other, that dragons tell you to say to yourself, which are straight out of self-help books.
the dragon publishing industry and the dragon, influencer bubble is very good.
Yes.
You know, these are I don't want to poke at that metaphor too hard. Honestly, I think that it's best just to just sort of enjoy that as the joke that it is and move on. But the point is that third time Byam was like, "Fuck this! I'm going to get far away from this." Leaves Korea behind, leaves East Asia behind, goes all the way over to the New World, and it's like, "All right, nobody's going to be around. I'm going to try this one last time." But
unfortunately, Leslie has either failed quals or has, basically decided that she is dropping out of her PhD program at the same time that her boyfriend has dumped her for her best friend. And so she is going hiking and is considering just, throwing herself off a cliff. Haven't we all been there? And then takes a selfie and immediately, and then sees Byam in the background, tags it in Mugi, and posts it to Instagram.
Thus, yes. Thus sealing Byam's fate perhaps more thoroughly and with, greater technology than anybody could have done previously. And Byam is so incensed by this that it abandons the idea of that it finally gives up on the idea of transcending and becoming a dragon. It's like, well, I'm just going to eat this person who fucked it up for me.
But not just eat this person. I have to. This person needs to feel the same sense of betrayal that I did when, she ruined my life. And so Byam disguises itself as a celestial fairy, as this like beautiful, unearthly, Taoist, immortal woman. And glowingly floats into her office and, announces that it might, asks her if she wants to be, if she wants to ascend to heaven, and then promptly gets distracted. By this point, she has been Leslie has been so cheered up by, having seen Inamugi in the wilds that she has gone back to her PhD program and gotten her PhD, and now she's an assistant professor somewhere. And so of, I think, astrophysics or something. And so Byam sees that and is like, what? You're also a sage?
Yes, you're studying the Tao, which handily encompasses everything.
Right.
That's the other issue with trying to study the Tao, is that it is literally everything. So, Byam gets distracted by this, and wouldn't you know it, but they end up falling in love.
Yes.
And then we get, the rare, but I always appreciate it, one person is immortal and the other person isn't, fantasy arc.
Yes.
Which
though I will note, in the middle of this, Leslie gets denied tenure and has to reset her life again. And it turned, and so Byam is actually really well positioned to give her good advice about this, because at this point,
right, exactly.
At this point, she's figured out that Byam is not a celestial fairy and is in fact an Ibuki, because celestial fairies don't threaten to eat senior faculty, and so just having somebody be like, yeah, it sucks, failure is terrible.
Yeah, but she. Leslie, is like, when I'm gone, I'm going to lay a geas on you, I'm going to lay a trip on you. I want you to try again. And that turns out to work. And so. Yes,
largely, but it turns out to work because, finally, Byam starts to ascend after Leslie dies, and Leslie's niece goes, oh, look, it's an Imugi. And, Byam starts to be pulled back down. And then the niece's, 4-year-old son or whatever, I don't know how old Sam is, but, little kid is like, no, that's a dragon.
and that does it.
That does it. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
which in some ways, like, you know, this is a good classic Taoist story. In some ways, this actually reminds me of Hong Lemong, because of course it does. Everything does. But
Yes.
but no, in that, you know, what Byam really needed was to go and have a mortal lifetime of tears. You know, pay its debt of tears, and that's what it needs to ascend.
Yeah, exactly. No, you can't. I mean, the thing about the Tao is that in order to fully understand it and to transcend, is that you have to experience death. Like that's sort of one of the essential like differences between stories that are told from like a Christian standpoint.
Nope, I'm going to stop you here, because Taoism is all about weird concoctions that'll make you immortal. Taoism is all about immortality. You're getting it mixed up with Buddhism.
Nothing's more dangerous than a little bit of learning, particularly if you learned it 20 years ago in school and kind of half remember it. I mean, there's philosophical Taoism and there's religious Taoism.
Right, but this is a story that's much more grounded in religious Taoism, in like folk Taoism.
I'll stop talking about philosophical Taoism in that case. But in this, it still applies to this story, though.
Right, but the point of this story is that I don't think that it's actually that, you know, Byam needed to understand everything, including death. Because like most of these dragons who are spouting self-help aphorisms, I don't think that they're actually particularly enlightened. It's what Byam actually needed was like the social bonds. It needed both sort of the experience of a lifetime, but also it needed these social bonds, right? Like it's, you know, it has this multi-decade marriage that has, you know, ended in death, but like that is making it try again. And it has its grandnephew who believes in it, basically, because it's a little kid.
You know what? You're absolutely right. You're 100% right, and I'm owned so thoroughly right now. This is 100% a religious Taoism, you know, parable, and not a philosophical Taoism parable. And I was trying to shove it in there to make it work.
Well, I don't even think it's entirely a religious Taoism parable. It's, you know...
No, it's not.
Because
it's more about...
kind of, you know,
it's more about tenure than anything else.
Well, no, I mean, the thing is that it's kind of poking fun at... it's kind of poking fun at, like, both a lot of the Taoist cosmology with the celestial fairies, and this sort of idea of immortality. Like, Byam is immortal, no matter what.
Yes.
Being a dragon isn't, you know, being a dragon is about, like, theoretically about achieving this enlightened status, but from what we can see of the dragons, they're not particularly enlightened. They just have a lot of self-confidence and were able to, you know, pull off this, like, basically status change. So
okay, well, if you want me to open that metaphor that we were talking about earlier, it's like my wife on my deathbed says, "I want you to get famous and rich."
Well, I think it's more
get that bag, darling.
I mean, I think it's more, you know, my wife on my deathbed says, "I want you to finish your novel," but
yes, but the end result is much the same. But yeah, no, self-actualizing, a complicated and fraught topic for any culture.
That some people just sort of have that confidence and are going to and become scammers. And some people, you know, have to take an entire mortal lifetime to, or actually 3,000 years plus an entire mortal lifetime to get their shit together.
Yes, indeed. Gosh.
But, you know, I like that it has two separate happy endings. I mean, Byam gets the thing that it keeps trying for. And Leslie doesn't, but Leslie ends up having, you know, Leslie has to give up on her dream, and really several of her dreams, and ends up having a much happier life because of it. she
A good life and a loving partner.
right,
Yeah.
like she has this like dream that she's going to be a tenured professor and probably marry the boyfriend, and she loses the boyfriend and eventually she loses the shot at tenure, but she instead has this very fulfilling career that actually allows them to live much nicer, and this loving partner. So
It's true.
sometimes what you need, according to the story, I think, is to keep trying until you get the life you've dreamed of. And sometimes what you need is to find better dreams.
Exactly. And to any of you out there whose dreams involve getting into academia, find better dreams.
Right. Read this story and then find a better dream.
Indeed.
Which is, in fact, pretty much what I did.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, I'll go on and write my novel eventually, I'm sure.
Yep.
But anyway, this was an extremely fun episode of Wizards versus Lesbians to record.
Yes.
Zen Cho is a great author. I haven't read anything by her that I haven't liked. And I'm excited to see what she does next.
Yeah, me too. Because I feel like she definitely sort of has been... She keeps getting better, by and large.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to whatever her next book is.
Indeed. And I don't know when this one's going to come out because it's we're probably not going to put out 2 short story collections in a row.
Yeah, we just sort of recorded this one for next time our buffer is running low.
Indeed. But ideally the next thing that we will be recording is a bonus episode with Jenna and Moran, which I'm extremely excited about.
Yes, which you will probably hear before you hear this one, in fact.
Yeah. How'd that turn out? Was it good? I hope so, because I'm really excited about
Yes,
it.
me too. Skull All right.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.